friends, why don't we settle ourselves in and begin in prayer this morning. Holy God, we awoke this morning to the sounds of your rain falling on thirsty land. And perhaps we realized that we too were thirsty. And so we came through the rain to this place that we might be together, that we might look for your Spirit, that we might feel the refreshment that we can find in you. Bless our time together this morning as we sing, as we pray, as we listen, as we allow ourselves to simply be together in this space, in this time. Allow us to be your people and to feel your presence. Let's take a moment in the intro to prepare ourselves for worship of God. So a couple of notes on our bulletin. You will notice there is an odd gap between the hymn, the Summons, which is a wonderful hymn, and the doxology, where we would normally pray, like the offering. We will still do those things, we just forgot to put them in the bulletin. So in that space, we're just totally on our own. But we'll find our way through. And also, in that time, Pamela Stephens, who is here as a soloist this morning, will be singing. What are you singing during that time?
Ride on, King Jesus.
Ride on, King Jesus will be the solo during the offering. That would be nice to look forward to. Would you join me in reading our New Testament prayer and invocation? Holy God, we gather this day to give thanks for your steadfast love and to experience afresh your desire to gather all people into communities of safety, justice, and peace. With Christ as our guide, we seek to grow into a new self, in your image, generous, compassionate, welcoming. Baptized into Christ, we seek to love all our sisters and brothers with Christ's inclusive love that sees beyond difference and extends the hand of peace to strangers. Send your Spirit among us and inspire our imaginations and wills in the things that make for peace. For we pray in the name of one who is called the Prince of Peace. Amen. And let's stand as we're able and join in singing hymn number 163, Lord of the Dance.
to St. Luke chapter 12, verses 13 to 21. Someone in the crowd said to him, "Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me." But he said to him, "Friend, who set me to be a judge or arbitrator over you?" And he said to them, "Take care, be on your guard against all kinds of greed, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of possessions." Then he told them a parable. The land of a rich man produced abundantly. And he thought to himself, "What should I do? For I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "I will do this. I will pull down my barns and build larger ones, and then I will store all my grain and my goods. And I will say to my soul, 'Soul, you have ample goods, laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, be merry.' But God said to him, 'You fool, this very night your life is being demanded of you. And the things you have prepared, whose will they be?' So it is with those who store up treasures for themselves, but are not rich towards God." The words of God for the people of God. Amen.
I tell people that my role as youth pastor boils down to 95% reminding people that hydration is important. And it is. Stay hydrated. So the question, what then shall we store up? What is of value? What is worth keeping if time continues to tick on? The power of entropy seems to be an unstoppable force in the universe. What is it that is left of value? What is it, if not grain, that we store up in silos? put away for some other day. And we are willing to say is ultimately of value, of worth. This coming Saturday will mark an important anniversary in the lives of this whole world. It will be the 71st anniversary of the bombing of Hiroshima. And then, of course, a few days later, the anniversary of the second atomic bomb in Israel. Roughly 250,000 people lost their lives in those two bombs, and marked the conclusion of a war that had cost us some 80 million lives, depending, of course, on how we count the lives. Historians have, and no doubt will continue to, debate exactly what this event meant in the terms of the war and in terms of the future of this Earth's geopolitics. Some will argue that the 250,000 lives lost in those strikes were still less than would have been lost had a land invasion been attempted. Others will hold that the bombing was unnecessary, that our enemies were ready to surrender anyways and perhaps would have surrendered without those strikes. Knowing how tortured so many of those individuals were who made that decision, knowing how tortured they were in the subsequent years, I'm not certain that there is too much value in that discussion. There's something of the gruesome mathematics of it all that doesn't feel like it leads to too much understanding. Similarly, we can debate how those bombs changed the future of our world. Could the Cold War have been the Cold War without the threat of atomic weapons? Had our relationship with the Soviet Union not gone so sour, what effect would that have had on relationships in South America, in the Mideast? Had our fears of this atomic age not driven us towards wars in Korea, in Vietnam, in Iran, in Afghanistan? Would we still be in the same situation we are in now? I'm certain that myriad arguments could be made on either side. And I'm sure that in the end, we can say little about what this anniversary means in the world with any amount of historical certainty, except to say that on that morning, 71 years ago, the world felt as if it changed in a fundamental way. We learned that our powers of destruction were nearly limitless. We learned that anything that we had the power to create, we also had the power to destroy in the blink of an eye. We learned that we, as the human race, had a power we had previously thought was only held by God and the unending power of time and entropy itself. Now we found that what time could tear down in centuries, we could tear down in moments. We found that what we could create over generations, we could uncreate in a flash. No longer were quote-unquote acts of God. The acts of God we had feared as our model for total destruction, because what storm, what natural disaster could even hold a candle to our newfound acts of humankind. And in the face of this newfound power of destruction, what on earth could we store up? And more so, what could we store up that would be beyond our own powers for destruction? How much wheat is enough to store up if we have the power to poison all the fields and all the plains of the world? What can we hope to save up that we might pass on to our children if we have the power to remove the future itself from our grasp? Oddly enough, what we chose to store up was not some supply of food that we thought might make us through a long, dark winter, nor was it the collected knowledge of the human race that might find itself on the brink of destruction. Rather, we chose to fill our silos with a different kind of wealth, a wealth of weapons stockpiled in bunkers around the globe. We chose to store up enough firepower in these nuclear arsenals to destroy ourselves some 100 times over. Certainly an odd legacy to leave for our children, and a legacy that continues to haunt us to this day. 71 years ago, the world changed as so many of these questions became real in our collective minds. But in hearing these words of Jesus this morning, we can see that even as these questions were new to us in a way, they were old as the dirt itself. This new reality, this new atomic age and all its fear, really nothing more than a reminder of the question that has haunted us since the dawn of time. What is actually of value? What is actually of worth? What is worth keeping? And what do we store up to our own detriment? What do we hold on to so tightly that it keeps us from holding on to something of a more real value? And how on earth do we convince ourselves to let go of that false security, to release our grip on the false wealth that we believe will protect us? How do we release ourselves from false idols that keep us from seeking God? I am reminded of a story told by Rob Bell. If you don't know Rob Bell, he is a wonderful preacher and teacher, perhaps one of the better known preachers of our day. And Rob tells the story of being at the beach with his son, who was only a few years old at the time. And his son has spent the morning collecting shells, as children do on the beach. And while he has been fascinated with all the glittering little bits of shells that he is finding on the beach, they really are just that, glittering little bits, as the shells have been crushed and crumbled by the waves. And so these are not the big, beautiful, whole shells, but rather are just shards and broken bits. Well, Rob's son is wading in the water with his hands full of these fragments when he sees floating right in front of him this beautiful starfish. A starfish that is just floating in the surf. And Rob describes watching his son as he breaks down in tears, crying, as he's looking at this starfish. And so Rob shouts out from the beach to "Son, what's wrong?" And his son replies back, "Dad, I want to pick it up." And so he asks, "So why don't you?" And his son cries back, "Because my hands are so full. I can't pick it up." And so Rob calls back again and says, "So put down the broken shells and pick up the starfish." And his son stands there looking at the fragments in his hand and the starfish floating in the surf, unable to decide as the starfish floats away. In the end, this was probably good for the starfish. The starfish likely had better things to do than to be handled by this toddler, who are not notorious for their gentle ways. But the image is so familiar. Hands and barns and bank accounts and silos, so full of the things that we think will bring us value. Things that we think will make us safe, things that we think will make us valuable or important, things that we hope will bring something permanent, something secure. And all of us crying as we watch these things of real value floating away in the tide. We use the word idolatry in churches. It's such a complicated word. And when we use it, we tend to think of golden calves and foreign gods. Too often we have used that word to hurt each other. But really, it's a word about how we have hurt ourselves. It's a word about how we find ourselves crying in the surf, hands so full of junk, while we watch that really cool starfish float away beyond our reach. It's a powerful image for humanity, standing with these broken bits. Something that we hope will have value while we watch something of more value float away. I once visited a man in the hospital. He was dying, and he knew it. And so we spent some time talking about life. And he said something to me that has haunted me ever since. He said, "I wish I had taken more trips with my wife." It was a simple line, a simple statement, a simple wish. And I thought perhaps he meant that he had wished they had taken more big vacations, that he wished they had toured Europe or sailed around the world. And so I asked him, "Where would you have gone?" And he said, "No, nothing so fancy. I just wish we had taken more time to drive out to the coast, or to head up into the mountains. I wish we had spent more time doing that together, because that's what we love to do." And he explained that he had always been so busy with work and the busyness of life. And by the time they retired, well, their health began to fail. And the free time that they thought they would have, well, rather they used it for doctor's appointments instead. And eventually, the time simply ran out. I don't tell you that story to depress you. Well, it is, for me anyways, a deeply depressing story. But I tell it as a reminder to us all, perhaps myself more than any of you, that today is a lovely day to take a drive. In a world of fear, in a world where we still hold on to those nuclear arsenals, in a world where we worry so much about how we will next hurt each other, in a world where there is so little that we can store up that will have any meaning, then today is a good day to take a drive. Today is a lovely day to share a meal. Today is a lovely day to let go of those shards and fragments that we convince ourselves are so valuable. Today is a lovely day to love someone. And so perhaps we all should. Perhaps that's something worth storing up in our silos and our minds. To store up those moments where we love each other, where we're with the people who we love, and where we care for this world, where we try to live as Jesus